I'm Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports, and we have a couple free agency updates on some key players for the Miami Dolphins. Calais Campbell, someone we've talked about quite a bit this offseason, and Terron Armstead, who is still on the roster but is contemplating retirement. And these free agency updates on these two veteran players come from Mike McDaniel, who was at the owners' meeting this week, spoke to Dolphins media on Monday, and was asked about Calais Campbell's status, asked about Terron Armstead's status, on if they could return to Miami and what they are going to do as they both have looming decisions in their respective football careers. And before we share those updates and talk in depth about what these mean for Miami, if you could pick one, all you could do is pick one of these two to return to their rightful roles on the Miami Dolphins, which one would it be? Calais Campbell, type CC. If it's Terron Armstead, type TA. Today's pinned comment, so get down in the comment section and answer for me. All right, this isn't my answer, but we are going to talk first about the veteran Calais Campbell because I do think it is more likely that he returns to play football this season than Terron Armstead. And Barry Jackson had the official note from McDaniel here saying that Campbell has hinted at playing in 2025. At least McDaniel feels optimistic that Calais will return to this season. But the question is who he will play for. It seems like he would choose between returning to Miami for 2025 or going back to Baltimore for 2025, somewhere that he spent a couple seasons at. And to me, we've talked a lot about this, but I think it's one of the most important things for the Miami Dolphins to do this offseason is to get Calais Campbell back on this Dolphins depth chart into this roster because this defensive line room as it currently stands is not a pretty sight. Zach Sealer is the only standard contract guy that you feel really good about. Now, Benito Jones was solid rotational dude last season, and he's going to return to be your nose tackle in all likelihood, but you need a legit starting guy opposite of Zach Sealer to create a nice tandem inside for the defense that wants to be run by Anthony Weaver that we saw last season. And Calais Campbell was excellent in that role last year. He played in all 17 games, and his big body, 6'6", just provides so many mismatches for the Dolphins in their favor. He's able to knock down passes at the line of scrimmage, make it difficult for quarterbacks to see over the middle of the field, but he also stopped the run, 12 TFLs, and was able to get after the quarterback as well, 12 hits and 5 sacks. I loved what Calais Campbell brought to the table last season. And I will be honest, though, when you're talking about the potential of him coming back, knowing that there's another team in the mix doesn't make me feel good. Now, I originally thought it was just either retirement or Miami, but the thought process that it could be Baltimore as well as Miami, it makes me a little nervous because if Calais Campbell wants to make good money, play somewhat meaningful football and play in a good locker room and city, yeah, Miami's the place for you. But if he wants to try to win an NFL championship this season, well, there's no debating that the Baltimore Ravens are in a better spot to do that. So the return to Baltimore feels just as likely as a return to Miami if Campbell ultimately chooses to not retire and play another season. All right, we're going to continue talking here for the Dolphins, but make sure you are subscribed, and this is a little update on our April sub battle, trailing early to the Steelers Talk channel here at Chat Sports, 42-25, but we're dropping content on the daily, so hit that sub button, join us, because we're the number one spot for Dolphins draft content that's coming in late April. But the reason why I'm so nervous about Calais Campbell's decision is because there aren't many better options out there to replace him. The Dolphins did not go out and make the initial things that they need to do required and happen in free agency. There was some adequate enough free agents to sign to add depth to this room. They didn't do it. And to me, when you look at the top 3 free agents available on the defensive line, these are the 3, man. And for the fact that these are the 3 best interior defensive linemen outside of Calais Campbell, that's an issue. No disrespect to these 3, but I would not feel comfortable having them as your number 2 defensive line starter next to Zach Sealer. I wouldn't. So to me, in free agency, it feels like Calais Campbell or bust, which is not a good place to be in, considering I would say you have a 33% chance to get him back when you think about the options, either retirement, Baltimore, or Miami, 1 of 3. So to me, you're going to have to draft the defensive lineman relatively high in April. I think if you go in day 1 in the first round, And Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, and Darius Alexander are the top 4 options. I don't have Mason Graham on here because that would require Miami trading up into the top 10, which I do not forecast them doing that. And I do not believe there's a world where Mason Graham falls to pick number 13. But if he did, you sprint to the podium and make that selection. But on day 2, this is where things get interesting because these are the 4 guys that I believe could be there at 48. A couple of them might actually go in front of Miami in the early second round. TJ Sanders, Tyleik Williams are those 2 guys I'm really looking at. But you got Shamar Turner, who could be available at 48. Alfred Collins at 48. Deanna Walker from Kentucky is someone that we've talked about, but he's likely someone maybe going in middle of the 3rd round. So either way, there are options for the Dolphins. And if I'm going to be honest, I know a lot of people are going to spam left guard, left guard, left guard, left guard, offensive line. It's such a big need. I understand that. I do get that thought process. It's been my biggest concern as well for the most part. But at this point in the stage of the offseason, I almost feel like the best course of action for Miami is going defensive back at pick number 13 overall, whether that's Will Johnson from Michigan or one of the 3 safeties, Jahdae Barron, Nick Emenwari, Malachi Starks, and then maybe even drafting a defensive lineman at 48 or trading up to get a defensive lineman at the end of the 1st round, because Derek Harmon to me will not fall to 28 or 48. Walter Nolan will not fall to 48, but they might be there in the late 20s, early 30s, and I would be intrigued by drafting a DB and then trading up to get that defensive lineman. That is how I feel in terms of the best way to potentially round out this defense that Miami needs to have be an improvement from last season if they want to make a deep run in the postseason in this upcoming season. I want to get to Terron Armstead, but hey, whoever the Dolphins draft will be representing these Miami Dolphins draft hats. They're on sale. Get them right now. Chatsports.com/Dolphins draft hats. So many different options. Curved brim, flat brim, fitted, snapback. You can get the one with the palm tree icon. You can get the standard one. Either way, I'm actually a fan of these Dolphins draft hats. I think they're better than the ones that came out the last couple of years. Get yours today. Links in the comment and description of today's video. One more time, chatsports.com/Dolphins draft hats. All right, let's move it over to the offensive line, and that being Terron Armstead, because McDaniel did provide a slight update on his status. As, remember, his contract went from getting paid $19-20 million this year to all the way down to the base $1.7 million, contemplating retirement. And Mike McDaniel was asked about Armstead once again at the owners' meeting and said that Terron is getting closer to making a decision. But as Mike McDaniel said at the NFL Combine, when that contract restructure took place as well for Armstead, that the Dolphins are operating as he will not return for the Miami Dolphins and be a left tackle this upcoming season. And that's something that I am very actually happy about. You saw that from David Furonis. Joe Schad also here saying that he's operating as Armstead is unavailable to us as he's trying to figure out what he's going to do with the rest of his life. And that's fine by me. It is, because you just need to give Patrick Paul an opportunity. And this is where things stand on the offensive line as of right now. You got your right side figured out in Austin Jackson, James Daniels, and Aaron Brewer, but that left side is the mystery. Armstead's still technically on the roster, but I anticipate the second-round pick from Houston in 2024 being that left tackle, Patrick Paul. Left guard still needs to be filled, whether that's in the NFL draft or whether that's in free agency with a guy like Will Hernandez or Brandon Scherf. Either way, I hope that Armstead actually does retire. I do. He has given the game of football a lot. He's had an unbelievable, successful career, and he's been excellent for the Dolphins, and he was playing at a high level last season. But his body is broken down. He's dealt with a lot of lower body injuries, knee, ankle. He's dealt with back injuries as well. And the truth is, I want to see Patrick Paul. Like, to me, you don't draft a player where the Dolphins drafted Paul and have him sit for multiple seasons. So to me, it's time to see that left tackle from Houston finally get his chance to be that franchise guy on the Miami Dolphins. But let me know, do you trust Patrick Paul? Do you have faith in the second-round pick, the second-year man, to be the starting left tackle for the Miami Dolphins? Type Y for yes or type N for no. I understand both sides of the coin. If you typed yes, cool. If you typed no, I understand as well. Paul got 338 snaps last season. He got about 3 starts against Tennessee and then a couple late in the year. And he was not the best. Like, I'm not going to act like he was right away a franchise left tackle lookalike. But to me, he flashed enough. And we always knew that when Paul was drafted, and you can roll the tape, go back to last season, I spoke about how I believe that Paul was more of a developmental pick. This was a selection that was not for 2024, but for the future of this team, where they were able to have Paul learn behind Armstead, be an understudy for a season, and then take over the following year, which I think is ultimately going to come to fruition here. But as I've mentioned throughout today's show, you do not spend a premium pick and asset, which I would consider a first or second round pick, a premium draft pick and asset. I would. So you spent a top 55 selection on Paul. You obviously have plans for him to start. Unless you just see him in practice and think he's the worst left tackle of all time, that's the only way you don't have him be your starter in year 2. You can't have him on the bench for 2 seasons, especially since he was a second round pick. You only get him for 4 years, not 5. And remember, if you wanted him for a 5th year, you could technically franchise tag him, but offensive lineman franchise tags are $25, $28 million nowadays. So that's kind of a pretty penny. So to me, you need to have him play out the next 3 years of his rookie contract to see if you have a franchise left tackle, and I am hoping he is. He showed flashes, got good size, good strength. He just improves his technique, footwork. I think he could be really good in the NFL. That will do it for today's episode of Dolphins Today. If you want more on the Miami Dolphins, you can always find me on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff. My DMs are open if you do want to hit me up. So go give me a follow. I'm always down to talk some Dolphins football.